Right now, 3 different countries are hosting the same World Cup, and that has never happened before in history. The United States, Mexico, Canada, 3 home crowds, 3 nations, all dreaming at the exact same time. And it has started perfectly. Mexico won the opening match in front of a roaring Estadio Azteca. The United States beat Paraguay. Canada took a point. Every one of them believes the same simple thing tonight, that playing at home can only help us. Here is the problem. That is exactly what all of them believed too. The hosts who got carried to glory by their own people, and the hosts who were buried in public in front of them. Because hosting a World Cup is either the single greatest advantage in sport, or its cruelest trap, and there is almost nothing in between. This is the World Cup host curse. Start with the good half, because it is almost unfair how good it is. Of every World Cup ever played, the host nation has gone on to win the entire thing 6 times. 6. That is roughly 1 in every 4 tournaments, handed to the team playing at home, and no other edge in football, none, comes close to that. It was true from the very first kick. The first World Cup ever, in 1930, was held in Uruguay, and Uruguay won it at home. Italy hosted in 1934. Italy won. Then, the one every English fan can recite in their sleep. 1966. England, hosting for the very first time, lifting the only World Cup they have ever won on their own grass at Wembley. West Germany did it in 1974, Argentina in 1978, and France in 1998, taking Brazil apart in the final in Paris. And it is not magic, it is real, measurable advantage. You don't fly anywhere. You sleep in your own bed. You already know the heat, the altitude, the pitch. And in every single match, 80,000 people are screaming your name while a whole country holds its breath. When that wave is behind you, hosting the World Cup is the closest thing the sport has to a cheat code. 6 nations rode it all the way to the trophy. But that same wave, 100 million people who expect nothing less than victory, is the exact thing that has drowned the others. Because the higher home advantage lifts you, the further you have to fall. And no one ever fell further than Brazil in 1950. Brazil didn't just host that World Cup, they built a cathedral for it, the Maracanazo, a stadium so vast it could swallow around 200,000 people, and they were monstrous on the way to the final group, putting teams to the sword. The deciding game against Uruguay wasn't billed as a contest, it was billed as a coronation. Brazil needed only a draw to be champions. The newspapers had already printed the front pages calling them world champions. A victory song was already written. Nearly 200,000 people poured into the Maracana to watch their country be crowned. Early in the second half, Brazil scored 1-0, and the party started in the stands. Then Uruguay did the one thing nobody in that stadium thought was possible. They equalized. And with about 11 minutes left, a winger called Alcides Gigia slid the ball past the Brazilian keeper. 2-1 Uruguay. The biggest crowd in the history of football went completely silent. Gigia would later say that only 3 people had ever managed to silence the Maracana: the Pope, Frank Sinatra, and him. Brazil had lost the World Cup final at home as the certain champions, and the country broke. Newspapers printed the result inside black borders, the way you announce a death. People wept in the streets. Some, it is said, died of heart attacks that night. The trauma went so deep that Brazil scrapped the white shirts they had worn that day. Forever. And that single defeat, is the reason they later became the team in famous yellow. Winning at home writes a fairy tale. Losing at home carves a scar that lasts generations. And if you think Brazil learned its lesson, they hosted again in 2014 and were beaten 7, won by Germany in their own semi-final, in front of their own fans. Same country, same curse. Now here is the part that should genuinely worry a host, because lately the curse hasn't waited for finals. It has been showing up in week 1. For 80 straight years, through every World Cup ever played, one thing never broke. The host nation always, at the very least, got out of the group stage. Always. Until 2010. South Africa staged the first ever World Cup on African soil, an entire continent roaring behind them, vuvuzelas shaking the stands, and they became the first host in history to be knocked out in the group stage. They actually won a game and drew another. It still wasn't enough. 80 years of the host always surviving, gone in 3 matches. And then Qatar, in 2022, found a brand new floor nobody knew existed. The most expensive World Cup ever staged, built entirely around a host that had never even qualified for a World Cup before. And Qatar didn't just go out early. They lost all 3 group games. 0 wins, 0 draws, 0 points. The fastest, most total host nation collapse the tournament has ever seen, out before some fans had even finished unpacking, a fortune spent getting ready for their moment. And their team was the first one sent home. So in just 12 years, being the host went from a near guarantee that you would survive to 2 humiliations in a row. The home crowd that is supposed to lift you turns out to be a spotlight you cannot hide from when it goes wrong, which lands us right back here, 2026. Not one host under that spotlight. 3, the United States, Mexico, Canada, each carrying a whole country, all at the same time. And history has already drawn both roads for them. There is the road of 1966 and 1998, your own people lifting you all the way to the trophy, the greatest feeling the sport can give. And there is the road of the Maracanazo, of South Africa, of Qatar, the very public, never forgiven agony of falling apart in front of the people who believed in you most. Tonight, for all 3, the dream is wide open. The wins are coming, the stadiums are shaking, but every cursed host in history started in exactly the same place, certain that home soil could only be a blessing. Some were carried to glory, others were swallowed whole. The World Cup has only ever taught us one rule about hosting it. There is no better place on earth to win it, and no crueler place to lose it. In 2026, 3 nations are about to find out which one they are.